How many people out there believe that global warming is a serious problem? Okay, we got like, what, 100% here? How many people who do not believe it? Nobody. Well, okay. I've looked into this quite a bit, and I'm moving into the skeptical about global warming category, and I'm going to explain a little bit about there is a global warming problem, but it's not as bad as what most people think it is. So I'm basically going to explain, what I've seen, and then I'm going to tell you the good news at the end, because the good news is that I think that, we're on track to actually solving the problem of global warming, So, is there global warming? The answer is yes, there is, because when you put carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the mechanics of it causes more heat to be retained. And the amount of carbon in the atmosphere has increased. So, anybody who says that there's no global warming is wrong. There is some, and, just because of the physics of carbon. Now, the question is how much of it, how much is the effect of it, and how much of it is man-made, and what are the long-term trends? The Earth has been heating up. We're in a cycle of there's about a 20,000 year cycle in the there's been about 6 cycles where it's gone up and down, in 20,000 year periods. They don't know what's causing that cycle, but the last cycle started about 12,000 years ago with the Ice Age, and the Earth has been naturally warming up ever since. And if the cycles continue, we're close to the peak of that cycle of the natural global warming thing. It appears that most of the history over the last 500,000 years, though, has been ice ages, is more normal for this planet than where we're at now. So there may come a point where we're going to wish that we had more carbon in the atmosphere to stave off the ice age, because where we're standing at right now was under, half a mile of ice 12,000 years ago. So, but let me explain some of the mechanics of this thing. You've heard of, 280 parts per million was, sort of like normal pre-industrial, and now, they were worried about 350 parts per million, and they're going to blow through 400 parts per million, and everybody's freaking out. But let me just talk about the numbers of what that actually means. I'm just going to use some round numbers. I'm going to round 280 up to 300. I'm going to round 350, 400 up to 400. So we're going from 300 parts per million to 400 parts per million. Well, 300 parts per million is 3 carbon dioxide molecules in 10,000. So if you had a jar with 10,000 white marbles and 3 black marbles, that's 300 parts per million. 400 parts per million is 10,000 white marbles and 4 black marbles. So the composition of the atmosphere is changing 1 black marble in 10,000. And that's supposed to be the difference between paradise and Venus, And, I look at that and it's like, I'm not buying that, So that's my first thing that it caused me to be a little bit skeptical about the degree of which global warming is a problem. The next thing is I started doing some historical research into, what was the atmosphere like, millions of years ago. And back about 500 million years ago, there were times where the atmosphere of the Earth was 1,000 times more carbon dioxide than it is now. And the planet was warmer back then, but we didn't turn into Venus, we didn't have any ice the Antarctica wasn't frozen, and there was tropics down there, and things were green and slimy, and it rained all the time, and it was a lot like being in tropical rainforest, with plants, that were humongous. In fact, that's why we have all this cold today is because, when we lived in a world that had so much more carbon dioxide, and the plants loved it, and the plants grew huge, and they all died, and layers went down, and all formed cold, and that's how that all got sequestered into the ground. But when you think about it, where does coal and oil come from? Coal and oil comes from plant material, and plants get their carbon from the atmosphere. So all the carbon dioxide that's stored in all the coal and all the oil on the planet used to be in the air. So if we found every bit of coal and oil and burned all of it, we would just be going back to the same place we were at before the coal formed in the first place, which is not where we want to be. But, the people who say that the planet's going to turn into Venus, that the oceans are going to boil off, and that we're going to get this runaway greenhouse effect, it just isn't going to happen, because been there and it didn't do that. So that's the good news, And the thing that's disturbing about some of this stuff is that, to be a climate change denier it's like blasphemy in the liberal world, to say this isn't happening. And it is happening to some extent, but what's happening is that there's a lot of really, really bad science on both sides. There's the people who are the oil companies who are funding the deniers, who are basically saying, oh, there's no problem. Carbon dioxide is good for plants, and the world would be better off if we had more carbon dioxide. They act like carbon dioxide is a vitamin or something like that. And then on the other side, you got an extreme amount of funding to make it as terrible as it can possibly be. It's going to heat up, the gas cups are going to melt, the oceans are going to rise, and all the coastal cities are going to be flooded, and that's all going to happen in the next 10 years. And that's not going to happen either. If the planet rose 100 degrees, it would still take a century to melt the ice caps. The ice caps take forever to form and forever to melt. But the thing is that there's a lot of really, really bad science, and the thing is when you abuse science, then science becomes unreliable, and science is the type of thing that we need to be able to rely on. We need to get the real truth from scientists, and we need to be able to, trust them. And when you throw a lot of money at science, to create a certain outcome, you will find scientists that will create that outcome. And the global warming thing in a lot of ways is a lot like marijuana is. There are people who will tell you that marijuana, if the federal government, it's a class 1 drug, it has no beneficial qualities whatsoever. It's so bad that you can't even do research to test it. It's more dangerous. It's the most dangerous category. And then on the other side, you got people who call it vitamin M. It's everybody should be smoking marijuana, and it has no bad side effects and only good side effects. And there's nobody in the middle, who will tell you that. Other than me, that'll tell you that, yes, marijuana is mostly safe. You can overdose on it. You can, there is problems with it. You should not drive, if you're extremely stoned. Certainly you should not work on dangerous machinery if you're stoned, but, it's a mix, and the same phenomena that's happening with marijuana is happening with global warming. And some of the big names that you'll see, trusted scientists, we all love Neil deGrasse Tyson. Everybody said, oh yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's a great guy. And I've watched him on Cosmos, and 95% of everything he says is wonderful, and then he gets off on some of these global warming things, where he says, talks about Earth turning into Venus, and talks about the Permian extinction being a global warming extinction, which it wasn't, it was a volcanic extinction. And you look at that, and it's just like, I can't believe this guy said this, It is so, and I can't believe that he doesn't know better than that, and I can't even explain, how someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson would even say something as ridiculous as the Earth is going to turn into Venus. And, and I want to say something about the planet Venus while I'm on the subject. They say, well, Venus has a thick carbon dioxide atmosphere, and therefore global warming has made it, 800 degrees on the surface. And, the thing about Venus is that Venus is so different from Earth that you can't even apply global warming to Venus, because the way global warming works is that sunlight comes through the atmosphere, it hits the Earth warms, and then it re-radiates infrared light back into space, and it dissipates. On the planet Venus, the atmosphere is 92 times thicker than the Earth, and it's got a lot of weird stuff in it besides just carbon dioxide. There's a lot of sulfuric acid, sulfur dioxide, other types of hydrogen sulfates, and sunlight doesn't even reach the surface of the planet. So when you have a situation where sunlight doesn't even reach the surface of the planet, you don't have greenhouse effect, because the dynamics of how greenhouse works just doesn't even apply to Venus. And the other thing too that most people don't realize is that even though Venus is closer to the sun, it actually absorbs less of the sun's energy than the Earth does, because the sulfur compounds in the atmosphere cause the atmosphere to be reflective. So the 70 or 75% of the sunlight that hits Venus reflects back out into space. So it only absorbs about 30% of the solar energy, where in contrast, Earth absorbs about 70% of the energy that the sun hits, is retained on Earth. So Earth actually absorbs more solar energy than Venus does. So they say, well, so why is Venus so hot? Well, it's because of the thickness of the atmosphere. It's 92 times as thick as Earth. So think of the difference between if you're in bed and you have one blanket on, and then you put a second blanket on, it's warmer. Okay, you put 92 blankets on, and you got Venus, So here's a planet that, like Earth started out as molten, like Mars started out as molten, like Mercury started out as molten. And because of the thick atmosphere and possible, radioactive isotopes in the core like the Earth has, it never cooled off, It's been hot for the last 4 billion years. So if you, I'll get to you in a moment, So the thing is if it were being heated by, the sun, the atmosphere would be hotter than the surface of the planet, and then transferring heat that way. But in fact, the surface of the planet is hotter than the atmosphere, therefore the atmosphere is not heating up Venus. You had a question, go ahead.
Yeah. One thing that you pointed out, but as you mentioned, the atmosphere on Venus is 92 times that of the Earth. The pressure on the surface of Venus is many times greater than that on Earth, and the compression of the gases themselves heat the surface. When you compress gas, they get hot. This huge pressure generates a great deal of heat on the surface.
Well, when you compress a gas, it gets hot, but it gets hot one time as it's being pressurized. Once it's pressurized and cools off, it stays, and doesn't continue to generate heat just because it's pressurized. That's kind of a one-time event. Just as the way refrigeration works is when you depressurize gas, it gets cooler. So, but it is true that where here on Earth, where we got 14.5 pounds per square inch of atmospheric pressure, I think it is. On Venus, you're looking at 1,300 pounds per square inch atmospheric pressure. it's like being deep under the ocean, just from pressure, You would be crushed, burned, and dissolved by sulfuric acid instantly if you were on Venus, You would die so fast that you wouldn't even know which one of those things killed you first. Venus is a harsher environment than being in outer space. So anyhow, but getting back to global warming is we do have an increase in carbon dioxide, and we have an increase in all kinds of other pollutants. So the idea of cleaning up the environment, of course, is a good thing, And I think that the damage that we're doing to the environment that's attributed to carbon dioxide is greatly exaggerated. But if you take the damage we're doing to the environment due to all forms of pollution combined, and the resources that we're using up, you're probably about at the same place. So we certainly need to live in a way that reflects that this planet is a spaceship, and if you lived on the International Space Station, and you did something stupid with the environment, you would die pretty quickly. This is a spaceship, and we should look at this planet as our spaceship, because if our spaceship becomes uninhabitable by humans, then we no longer get to exist here. So anyhow, let me get to the biggest problem with carbon dioxide, and other types of pollutants isn't, everybody loves to blame the oil companies, but, we wouldn't even exist at the population levels we have today if not for fossil fuels. Coal, oil, and gas, has built all the stuff that we have today. And, it's not their fault that we got to where we are. Now, it is their fault, to continue in a direction that we don't want to go in. But, what used to be a good thing is now turned into a bad thing, and we now have new technologies to replace all that stuff, which is the good news, so that, if you believe in if you don't believe it, if you believe like I do, this is good news, and if you think that global warming is a lot worse than what I think it is, then this is great news, is that, that basically, Elon Musk is going to solve all the problems of the from several different aspects, electric generation of electricity from solar panels is getting better, more efficient, and cheaper every year. And there's plenty of sunlight, and we could, power the planet hundreds of times over with the amount of light that comes down. If we took a 100 square mile piece of the desert somewhere and built, 100 by 100 mile solar collector, that would be enough to power the entire planet. That's how, much energy we have. When the sun is shining, we get a kilowatt a square meter, of energy, free energy coming from the sun. So that's electrical usage. Now, electrical consumption, is, we got all these gasoline cars, and they'll all be replaced by electric cars someday. And the only thing that we need, when the gasoline engine dies and electricity replace it, is battery technology. If we had a battery that was 4 times as good as the batteries we have today, and in the next 10 to 20 years we will have, nobody's going to buy gasoline cars anymore, because the problem with electric cars isn't the electricity, it isn't the cost, it's the batteries. So we're one battery breakthrough away from converting from gasoline cars to electric cars. And when we go to electric cars, then the oil companies go away. We no longer have to fight wars in the Middle East, to get our energy. We can just put up our solar panels to get our energy. And the other thing about batteries is grid storage. You have a question?
Yeah, I got sort of a question and a comment. One is plant life the only thing that removes carbon from the air? I mean, haven't we checked carbon? Don't we have ways of checking carbon level over time? And And does
Well-
the theory that it's all taken out by plant life hold? Are there other mechanisms?
Yeah, there are other mechanisms, and I wish I knew more specifics about it, but the ocean itself absorbs quite a bit of carbon, you know.
I think rain helps remove it from the atmosphere.
Yeah, well, rain brings it down and then it ends up in the oceans,
It-
which is actually causing a problem with ocean acidification,
Yeah.
which is something that I don't know enough about to speak, and other than
Yeah,
it's
it-
probably
it-
not a good idea, you know, to change the pH of the ocean and do a chemistry experiment on the Earth.
The other comment I wanted to make is that I read somewhere is that the amount of energy that we receive from the sun has about doubled since life began. Now, there you're talking about billions of years.
Yeah, that's
So
over 3 billion.
Yeah,
year
so the
period,
ice
yeah.
ages are only 20. There's no significant change in the sun's radiation over that time, and it's probably not even consistent.
Right, yeah, the
But-
sun's radiation is
But
not
at some
causing the
point,
Earth
we are going
heat
to
up.
fry or move on.
Well, the thing is that
And I guess the question is there a tipping point where we won't recover?
no, because we've already exceeded that, you know, in the past. You know, you're talking about, you know, the
No,
tipping
we've
point.
exceeded some level, but the atmosphere, the biosphere has been able to adjust to keep us going. Is there a point in which atmospheric pollution alone will be enough to destroy, to create a runaway mechanism?
No, because never. Because all that carbon used to be in the atmosphere, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen then.
Was it there in the atmosphere?
What'd you say?
That was my first comment about other mechanisms.
Yeah, there is. You know, besides plant life, there's also absorption from the ocean, and then, quite frankly, some of the things that we should do. You know, we recycle the way we generate a lot of plastic. Plastic is sequestered carbon. You know, quite frankly, we ought to just take plastic and bury it in caves and leave it as sequestered carbon. You know, instead of trying to recycle it, we've already sequestered it. You know?
Yeah, I'm saying to say that all this planet carbon was once in the atmosphere, it probably came from the atmosphere, probably wasn't all there at the same time.
Yeah, it was. It was.
At the same time?
I'm not sure, because volcanoes have, over the years, have contributed to the carbon that's discharged
there's
in the
carbon
atmosphere.
entering the atmosphere and carbon being removed.
Right.
Various mechanisms.
But there has
always
been a
have
time.
with or without life.
There have been times in the past where the carbon dioxide levels were 100 times greater than it is today, and we weren't. You know, we didn't have a runaway greenhouse effect
How
from that.
far back? Maybe the sun was.
Oh, well, it was 500,000 years ago, I think it was. The
Okay.
sun was a little dimmer back then. But, you know, here's the other thing that you've all heard of sea level rise. You know, how many people think that sea level rise is a big problem? You know? Okay. Well, did you know that a week ago that NASA came out with the figures on Antarctica, and it turns out that for the last 25 years, the ice in Antarctica has been growing and not shrinking, and that they've been adding 112 billion tons of ice a year to Antarctica. You know, so and Antarctica is 6 times bigger than Greenland. So even if Greenland's melting, Antarctica's growing, and the net difference is if the oceans are getting deeper, it's not getting deeper fast,
Mark,
and it's nothing to worry about this century.
I have a question, Mark, about carbon dioxide, free carbon dioxide,
Okay.
in a gaseous form that's, you know, in the air, in the atmosphere. You said before, the coal and oil is in the ground. It was up there before. It was on the surface. Now it's just in the ground. So it goes up. There's no change. Although what I understand is that when you burn oil and you burn coal, you turn all that carbon into a gaseous form now that goes into the atmosphere that causes a greenhouse effect that now holds the heat of the sun on the planet, which is what we're talking about. Now, is this true, or are you saying that this isn't so, or that it is not as serious? Well, I don't
No,
understand.
I'm saying is that it used to be in gaseous form to start with, and carbon dioxide is a gas. Yeah, so, you know, the plants over billions of years have taken it out of the atmosphere, or not billions, a billion years, has taken out of the atmosphere and put it in the form of coal and oil. But all the coal and oil on the planet, you know, not the stuff, just the stuff we burn, but all that exists, even the unreachable stuff, all of it used to be in the air at one time. You know, that's coal was in, you know, carbon dioxide was in the air. Plants took it out, put it into the ground. And there's also, you know, limestone is a carbon. Okay.
I have a brief comment and a question. My comment is that you started out this discussion, and periodically throughout your discussion, you've talked about whether we believe in global warming. And I don't believe it is a belief issue, it is a science issue. Do we accept the scientific evidence is a more appropriate way to discuss this. It's not believing in it, it's looking at the science.
Yeah.
My question is, what are your credentials to speak on this issue?
Oh, well, I'm just a smart guy, you know, who reads a lot of stuff. I agree with going with the science. It's just that, you know, the science, when you actually look at the facts of it, the science doesn't support global warming, but there's scientists who are paid to make global warming.
And your credentials are just that you're smart.
Yeah.
As I and everybody in this room is smart.
Right. Anyhow, back to the good news about it is electric cars, batteries, solar energy, and the other thing, which is the elephant in the room, is population control. Because, you know, whatever, you know, environmental problems we have, including carbon dioxide, is proportional to population, and we have too many people on the planet. Now, the good news about that is that the rate of population increase is going down, and that soon we're going to be in a situation where the rate of increase of the population is going to level out, you know, to be even. And some people think that that's going to peak around 10 to 11 billion people, which is more people than we ought to have on the planet. But if we can stabilize at 11 billion and then start going down from there, then, you know, we can have a manageable population on the planet. And one of the things that's helping to limit population growth is new technology and educating women in third world countries. That the more women have access to education and the more they have access to birth control, the more they have access to medical care, the less they are needing to, you know, have a whole bunch of children, so they have 7 children so that 3 of them will live. So, you know, the advances in computer technology and the ability to deliver the internet to the entire planet, which is, you know, in the next 10 years we'll have internet, you know, to every spot on the planet from space, and low-cost access to it. The people in the third world, you know, who don't have access to computers and the internet will, and we're going to come up with a population that's a lot more educated, and the more educated population will be able to interact, you know, with the rest of the world, and they'll stop reproducing at a high rate like they are now, just like people in the first world have reduced their reproductive rates. So the good news is I think we're going to get through this. So there's a certain amount of global warming going on, and that, but it's bad, but it's not as bad as what most people think it is. And what it means is that we have more time, and in that more time, which is, you know, a century or so, you know, we on the earth can get it together, solve the population problem, bring in new technologies, you know, for clean energy, and that, you know, everything is not going to end up, we're not going to hell. We're going to make it through this, and we're going to go and continue to advance as long as we don't do something really stupid in the meantime. Paula.
A couple of things. One, we've talked about a natural increase in, or a non-human caused increase in the temperature.
Right.
Is one issue. The other side of that is that it's caused by humans. it doesn't really matter who's causing it if it's happening and it's a threat to us. And if there's a natural increase, we just need to do more on the human cause side, out of proportion to what percentage that is to the causing the problem, because we're not going to change what the natural world is doing. We need to change our effect on the natural world. So you had talked earlier about it just happens, it's natural. So
There's a natural component to it.
Right. Well, it seems to me that we need to compensate and do more on the human side.
Right.
Yeah. And the other point I forgot.
Well, there's plenty of time, so we can come back to you. Yes, there is a natural and a man-made side, and the man-made side, has to do with, the idea that we should stop pollution in general of all forms, including carbon dioxide, which is, in my opinion, is far less of a problem than, a lot of the more advanced hydrocarbons and radiation, from nuclear. I mean, some of the stuff that, when nuclear becomes greener than natural gas, it's like, okay, this is getting ridiculous now, I mean, natural gas is a pretty clean form of energy, even though it's carbon. It's a lot cleaner than coal, and we're moving a lot from coal to natural gas, which is a big step forward, So we need to recognize that going from coal to natural gas is a huge step in the right direction. Going from natural gas to electricity is an even bigger step in the right direction, But, people who put down natural gas is, they're just plain wrong about that. So, but the man-made component, is, well, if you look at it, we increase 100 parts per million, that's man-made, so that's 25% of it, is us, and 3/4 of it is natural, just to throw out, some raw numbers that probably don't mean a whole hell of a lot, We're on the natural part. We're at the top of the natural cycle, or almost at the top. But on the other side of it is a steep side that goes downward toward ice age, and it may be, that just out of luck, that the amount of carbon dioxide that we've added to the atmosphere might be enough, to slow down the advancement of the next ice age that's coming. Because when that happens, North America, most North America and all of Canada, it becomes an ice sheet again. We're going to be able to walk to Russia, like we did, years ago, Okay, next.
Thanks for your talk. Usually don't hear these views at this venue. First of all, the question that the lady raised, it's not a matter of, is there global warming and you believe it? We have been going through warming. That's not the issue. The issue is, what's the cause? How important is it? As the gentleman said, how much of it is our contribution and what impact they may or may not have on it? I'm glad you brought up the Greenland ice caps. Most people don't realize or aware of that. The other thing I wanted to raise is, there's been shown a large correlation between the 10 or 12 year or whatever it is sunspot activities that relate to the curve of heat. And you're right, the studies and the cycles show that we've just about peaked on the warming cycle, and we're headed back. We're at the trough, but heading back towards the ice ages. And the other thing I would suggest is debatable that everyone here is smart.
Okay.
Okay, so you don't believe, you believe that global warming exists and it's man-made and it's natural, and that we have we're in a cycle that's going into ice age, and I guess from sunspots too. That's part of it is the cycle of the sun with sunspots. But the biggest problem with global warming isn't the temperature, and it's the weather. It's the extreme weather conditions that cause famines and floods, and there you go with your population control, which that's going to be a lot of people are going to die because of this if we don't put things in place. It's maybe we do have 100 years before.
Okay, that's an excellent point. What you said about weather. Like I said, I hadn't prepared today, and that was one of the things in my mind, that I was going to do had I prepared. So let me talk about weather. Weather is the canary in the coal mine. The real test of global warming is, do we have more extreme weather? I'm talking about wind events. If the planet heats up even a little bit, you're going to see a significant increase in tornadoes and hurricanes. So if you see that globally over a long period of years that the hurricanes and tornadoes are going up, then global warming is definitely happening. And if you see that they are not going up, then global warming is definitely not happening. Those two are linked. So that's one of the canary in the coal mine. Now, another thing that happens, everybody here has seen water boil. When you turn the gas up, it boils harder, but the water doesn't get hotter. You just have more evaporation. So one of the effects that's happening here on Earth, that even if we are retaining more heat on the surface, is that you're going to have vertical mixing, and that creates like a boiling type phenomenon that could keep the planet at almost the same temperature, even with a higher level of energy retention on the surface. So you might not get the ice cap melting effect. In fact, the Antarctica's ice sheet growing in an ice mass rather than decreasing in the ice mass is not necessarily an argument that global warming isn't happening, because because when you have higher evaporation, you're going to have more water being evaporated, so you're going to have a higher level of precipitation. And when you have more precipitation, you're going to have more accumulation of ice mass at the poles, because that precipitation freezes. So you might not, the ocean rise problem, that the oceans are going to rise and everybody's going to be flooding. I think that the NASA data sort of proved that aspect of it is dead. Even if there is global warming, we could have an increase in ice mass in Antarctica. Not so much as Greenland, because it's a little further away from the pole, but in Antarctica, but the weather, as you said, that's the real canary in the thing. So we will have, we're going to have to build our houses a little stronger, to handle the tornadoes and the hurricanes and so forth. You're going to have a total increase in precipitation, So those people are talking about, yes, there will be places where there's drought, but there's going to be more places where there's flooding than drought, So, if you're worried about, global warming, you should be worried more about flooding and increased precipitation rather than drought and decreased precipitation, which is another one of those little facts that frustrate me, is they think hotter means drier and hotter means wetter, globally. So, anyhow.
Okay, to finish my question.
Finish your question.
But that's true, and it may be that the weather pattern, but the weather pattern changes in this area on the West Coast. It might be that we're going to have we're in a drought cycle, but it's getting worse, and maybe we're, the what do you call it, jet stream is changing the location.
Yeah.
And we might, all the food that we produce for the whole world in California, we might not be able to do that anymore. And a lot of other places, and it's changing like that, where we're going to be running out of food instead of having a surplus.
Well, we're going to find new places to grow food. It's still going to be just as easy to grow plants in a warmer planet, it just may not be in California. You know, it may be that, you know, it'll be Oregon, you know, instead of California. And the other thing is we may be looking at new ways to grow food because, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, using technology where they, you know, do basically hydroponics, you know, and floating farms on the ocean and things like that, and genetic engineering where you can just grow, you know, animal meat without growing animals, you know, and things like that. And other types of, you know, climate, you know, controlled farming that will support the higher population. We're going to have to go to that, you know, at some point. You know, we may be making our food out of algae, you know, to support the, you know, 11 billion people on the planet. We're going to have to do some extreme things, but climate always changes. The planet has always had. The planet is not a stable place. You know, this planet has been hot. It's been an ice ball. It's been all kinds of different things, you know, and you know, and which is one of the reasons why, you know, you want to do things like go to Mars and migrate out into building colonies directly out in space, because, you know, this planet is not a stable place to be, and the climate is always going to change, and we're just lucky as can be that it's been this stable all along, you know, and the assumption that things are just going to stay as it is forever is just kind of ridiculous to begin with. You know, one should expect climate change. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, we are focusing here on global warming, which is fine, right? But also it's combined with pollution, right?
Pollution,
and
yeah.
I feel that reducing pollution and carbon dioxide or other polluters is a good thing anyway, not only from the global warming point. I will present the medical problem. Years ago, we were in China to a city called Xi'an as an example, and the pollution was so big that you couldn't see a block ahead, you know. And I spoke with people that were recently in China, same place, and the situation has not changed, you know. So I'm a little in favor of this issue of global warming, because on the other hand, it helps to increase the health of the people, no, if you reduce pollution. And the other thing is what you said very correctly, that it will reduce these terrorist things supported by oil, money, you know, and that will be also an advantage. Perhaps you can get rid of ISIS, for instance, you know.
Right, yeah, I can't wait to get an electric car to stop the spread of Islam, you know, the financing of, you know, terrorists in the Middle East, because that every time I fill my gas tank, you know, I'm buying a gun for, you know, another terrorist, you know, indirectly. But yes, you know, that's an interesting argument. The end justifies the mean argument that, you know, well, even if, you know, the global warming people are exaggerating the facts, you know, that the result is that we have a reduction in pollution, and yes, sometimes there is a benefit to not being completely honest, you know, and I agree with that, you know. However, you know, I still feel like there is an imperative, you know, to reduce pollution and reduce carbon dioxide and all that other stuff, you know, over the long run. In other words, if we don't do something, you know, if it's not true now, it will be true eventually. It'll just be true further down the line, you know. So the climate alarmists are getting things to happen earlier that we should be doing anyhow, and that's a good thing, you know. The bad thing is, you know, they've been cooking the numbers, and you can only cook the numbers for so long, because if you exaggerate the heat on the front end and you cook the numbers retroactively, you know, to make a slant, then as time goes on, you know, that slant's going to change, because you can't keep that up forever. So then at that point, then science itself becomes discredited, and then when the real issues come along, nobody believes it, because the scientists have been discredited because they haven't been honest, you know. So I think that in the short term, you're right, you know, that even if the global warming people are partially wrong, and I say partially because, you know, I'm not, you know, saying that, you know, there isn't any, you know, there is some, you know, and the question is how much and how fast. And, you know, my argument is that it's not quite as bad as what a lot of people say, but we definitely should be doing something about it, you know. So So yes, I can appreciate what you're saying. That is a mixed bag, from that aspect. That sometimes the wrong answer creates a better result. Go ahead.
So with the population control. So I mean the climate's going to go up and down, right? And if you're in one of the areas of the world, like say the Middle East, like the Persian Gulf, you're going to be not fit. You're not going to be able, like evolutionarily, we can only survive in so much heat, right? And so we're getting to the point where elderly and really young people are starting to die from just like healthy people going outside are dying a little bit more because it's a little bit hotter and they're right on the cusp of the habitable area of the earth. So like how many people, I guess you're asking the question, how many people are we gonna let die? Like at what point are we gonna say we need to slow this down because people are starting to die more?
Well, I think we should be doing, all the stuff, with, reducing carbon and moving to electric cars and electric solar power and all that
So
stuff.
it's not critical for us here, but there are places in the world, like the Persian Gulf and the Middle East, where it is already like killing more people.
Yeah.
And the drought in Syria.
If you're
is
in those
record.
really hot places,
Yeah.
you could die from going outside if it's too hot, I mean, 10,000 years ago, the Sahara Desert was a rainforest. Back when, we were under ice here in San Jose, California, Sahara Desert was a paradise. The earth changes. And even if we stopped, all carbon emissions today, the planet is going to keep heating up unless we, actively find a way to cool it. And we don't want to do that because, on the cycle, 1,000 years from now, we're going to have an ice problem. We're not going to have a global warming problem. The oceans are going to be going down, and the whole situation is going to be reversed. So, climate change is part of reality. The climate always changes. The weather is never predictable. And, but we do need to, take care of our environment, so we need to figure out a way to live as cleanly as possible, which does mean getting off of carbon.
Okay,
But there's nothing we can do to stop the Middle East from getting hotter. It's going to get hotter, even if we stop polluting. Well, you move, if a certain part of the planet becomes uninhabitable, you move to a different place, when the next ice age happens, people will be moving back south. That's the way it is on this planet, unless we develop, technology that we can make a space-based thermostat on the planet with, orbiting mirrors, that we manufacture out of asteroids. The planet is going to have, unpredictable weather. It's just reality.